Hey there, and welcome to Family Revenge. We're so glad you're here. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you can stay with us for every twist and turn. Let's jump right in. I pulled into the gravel driveway, the crunch of tires against the stones like a sound I hadn't realized I missed. The house looked exactly the same, or so I thought. Same faded shutters, same front porch where my father would sit and smoke on summer nights, watching the stars, barely saying a word. But the air felt different, thinner, colder, like the house had forgotten me. The door opened before I even knocked, and there stood my mother, Eileen, her hair still the same shade of blonde that looked like it was straight out of a bottle. She looked at me like she wasn't sure who I was for a second, then the familiar tight-lipped smile. Lacey, she said, her voice flat like she had to say it. Not a hello, just my name. A problem to be solved. Hi, Mom, I replied, not sure how to break the ice. Trina's in the kitchen, she said, stepping aside. She barely let me in before she went back to whatever she'd been doing before I'd arrived. It was like I was a guest, not a daughter. I made my way inside, the old floorboards creaking under my boots. Everything still where I left it. The coat rack, the family pictures on the wall, the smell of something faintly burned in the air just like it used to be. But none of it felt real. None of it felt like home. Trina was at the table, of course. Her hair was perfectly styled, her smile too wide to be sincere. Look who decided to show up, she said, her words sugar-coated with something sharp underneath. I smiled weakly, trying to play along, but the tension in the room was already thick. So, I take it you've come for Dad's memorial, Trina continued, her voice breezing past me like I wasn't even there. Mom and I thought it would be nice for you to be here. It wasn't an invitation. It was an ultimatum. Then it hit me. My old bedroom. It wasn't a bedroom anymore. The bed was gone, replaced with mats and candles, a yoga room, my hands clenched at my sides. Your room's been converted, Trina added, as if she could see the irritation in my face. Hope that's okay. We've set up a guest room for you. I nodded, swallowing the bitter taste of my own memories, then followed her to the guest room. It didn't even feel like mine. It felt like a stranger's space, and I was the intruder. I sat down at the dinner table, feeling more like a ghost than a guest. The conversation hummed around me, but no one seemed to notice I was there. Trina took the center of the room, like she always did. She laughed too loud, smiled too wide, her words smooth but laced with something sharp that pricked at me like a needle. So, Lacey's here for Dad's memorial, she said, her voice a little too bright. I think it's sweet she could make it, well, after everything. You know, I heard she's doing well now. Finally settled down. Not that it was easy, right? I didn't respond. It wasn't even a question. It was a performance, and she was the star. My eyes slid around the table, picking out the faces of my family, the cousins, the aunts, uncles, all of them watching, nodding along like this was some kind of scripted show. Nobody said anything to stop her. My mother didn't even flinch. Lacey's military service, of course, Trina continued, now directing her attention to the others like we were all supposed to be impressed. I guess they gave her a pension or something. Not much, but it's something, right? I let my fork scrape across my plate, my hands tight around it. My service wasn't a something. It wasn't a footnote to be dismissed while the rest of them acted like their perfect little lives were somehow worth more. Right, one of my uncles chimed in, nodding like Trina was spitting wisdom. Well, I guess we can't all be military heroes. It was too much. The way they dismissed me, like I didn't exist unless it was to be reduced to a paycheck and a forgotten story. I wasn't even sure if they saw me as a person anymore, or if I was just a blip in their perfect little family history. And my mother, Eileen, just sat there, still silent. She didn't step in. She never did. I took a long breath, setting my fork down with deliberate calm. My eyes wandered to the framed photo of my father on the mantel, the man I'd never been able to fully measure up to in their eyes, the same man whose voice had echoed in my head the entire ride over, telling me to stay away from this house, to protect myself, to protect my own. Trina leaned in, lowering her voice so the others had to lean in too, like we were sharing a secret. Remember when Lacey came back from that last deployment? She asked with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. I think she was, well, a little, off. I mean, things have settled, right? You're better now, aren't you, Lacey? I felt my skin burn under her words. Off? Like a broken toy you could just toss aside. But I kept my mouth shut, just took a deep breath, let her words roll off me. In the midst of it all, I felt my fingers go cold against the edge of the chair, my hand subconsciously reaching for the folded letter in my pocket, the deed to the house, my father's handwriting still clear in my memory, my name, right there, still on it. I knew it was mine. It was always mine. I couldn't help it. I pulled the letter out and slipped it beneath the table, making sure no one noticed. Trina would freak out if she knew. They all would. But it didn't matter. They could rewrite my past, twist my story all they wanted. But that piece of paper, that deed, would be my truth. And it wasn't going anywhere. Lacey? Trina's voice broke through my thoughts, her eyes narrowing slightly, almost as if she could sense something had shifted in me. You okay over there? I nodded, barely making eye contact. Yeah, just thinking. She didn't press further. That wasn't the point. It wasn't ever about me. Not really. The tension hung thick as dinner started. Trina was still performing, sliding between fake pleasantries and thinly veiled jabs at me. Her smile was a little too wide, like she was getting some sick satisfaction out of this game. Then, right when it felt like it couldn't get worse, she turned to me with that sickly sweet expression, the one she saved for when she was about to make me the joke. Lacey, she said, her voice honeyed but sharp, would you say the blessing for us? I know you're so good with words. The room went quiet. My family, all of them staring at me like I was some kind of special guest, like they were waiting for a show. I didn't want to. I really didn't. But I wasn't going to back down either. Not now. So I folded my hands, took a deep breath, and bowed my head. I wasn't going to just recite some simple prayer, not after everything. Thank you for the food, I began, my voice steady but raw. Thank you for the sacrifices we've made. For the ones who gave everything, who came home broken, who never made it back at all. Thank you for this house, though it may not feel like a home anymore. And thank you for giving us the strength to find our own way, even when others try to erase us. I felt every word like it was coming from my bones. I was speaking to my father, to myself, to all the things they were trying to take away. When I lifted my head, I could see Trina's mouth tightening, like she had to swallow something sour. The others looked awkward, unsure of how to respond. It didn't matter. I wasn't asking for their approval. Trina didn't miss a beat. Without missing a breath, she lifted her glass, her tone shifting from pointed back to her performance mode. To family, to love, and to the ones who are still here, she said, her eyes flicking over to me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Here's to finding peace, no matter how it comes. Her toast was sharp, like a knife buried between ribs, and I could feel the chill run through my body. It wasn't just about my past anymore. It was about rewriting it, erasing it, making me the outsider. I was trying to hold it together when the doorbell rang. The timing was almost too perfect, but I didn't care. My eyes shot to the door, already knowing who it was before the door swung open. Connor. I didn't know if he'd just showed up on a whim or if Trina had pulled some last-minute trick. But there he was, a tall, solid presence in the doorway, scanning the room, his eyes settling on me first. Lacey, he asked, his voice low and steady. I could see the confusion flicker in his gaze before he offered a nod, a kind of silent acknowledgement. My heart did a strange flip in my chest, part relief, part something else. Trina wasn't expecting him. She was caught off guard, and for a second, her fake smile wavered. Well, this is a surprise, she said, her tone dipping just enough to show she wasn't thrilled. Connor took a step into the room, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the situation in seconds. He'd known me long enough to see when I was being quietly buried under someone else's narrative. Didn't know I was crashing a family event? Connor said, turning to face Trina, his voice laced with just the right amount of casual humor to cut through the tension. But I'm happy to be here. Trina's gaze flicked over to him like a threat, but Connor didn't back down. He didn't need to say much. His presence alone was enough to throw her off. I didn't need to say anything. Connor wasn't here to smooth things over. He wasn't here to play along. He turned back to me then, a small, knowing smile in his eyes. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't have to. He was on my side. That was enough. As the dinner continued, the conversation shifted around us, and I realized I wasn't just a bystander anymore. I wasn't some distant memory of a person they could rewrite however they wanted. I didn't need to speak. I didn't need to yell. The truth was already slipping through the cracks. I could feel it. Subtle, quiet. But there, every laugh, every comment, every move they made, They were digging their own hole, and I'd be standing in the light when they fell into it. I stepped outside onto the back porch, needing a minute to breathe. The weight of the dinner, the tension, all of it was pressing in on me. The evening was cool, the air thick with the smell of pine and the faint hum of crickets. I barely noticed Connor had followed me out until he leaned against the railing next to me, his gaze steady, taking in the house behind me. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low, like he knew I wasn't. I shrugged, looking out into the darkening yard. Just needed some air. "You're holding it together better than I expected," he said, his tone like he was testing me. "But I can see it. That's not your family in there." "No," I said, almost laughing. "It's not, but I've been pretending it is for a long time." Connor didn't say anything for a moment. Then, he leaned in a little, lowering his voice like he had something important to share. "I've been looking into the house." My heart skipped, and I turned to face him. "What do you mean?" "The deed," he said, his eyes meeting mine. I looked it up. "You still legally own it, Lacey. Not Trina. Not your mom. You. The whole place is still under your name." I exhaled, almost in disbelief. I had wondered, but hearing it out loud felt different. Real. That's what I thought," I muttered, my chest tightening. "But Trina, she's been acting like it's hers, like I don't have a right to it." Connor nodded slowly. "She's been trying to pull something. I did some digging. When you were deployed, she filed paperwork claiming you were missing. Tried to transfer ownership by saying you were unaccountable, that you'd abandoned the property." The anger hit me in a wave, hot and sharp. "So that's how she thought she could take it? Just write me out of everything?" "Exactly." Connor's expression hardened. "It's a legal loophole. She thought no one would notice, that you wouldn't come back to fight her." I felt my fists clench, the familiar sick feeling of being played bubbling up in me. She thought she could just take it. Pretend I was gone forever. Connor stepped closer, his tone firm but calm. "Well, she was wrong. She underestimated you." I took a long breath, trying to swallow down the rage threatening to spill over. "She's rewriting everything, Connor. My service, my dad's legacy. It's like none of it matters, like I'm some stranger to them." He didn't answer at first, just stared at me like he was piecing something together in his head. Then, he said something that hit me hard. "Your dad knew, didn't he?" I nodded slowly, the memory of that conversation coming back to me like it was yesterday. My father, sitting in that old worn-out chair in the living room, his voice low, serious. "You've got to protect yourself, Lacey. They'll twist things. They'll use you until they can't, then they'll turn on you. Don't let them take it from you. Not the house. Not anything." I swallowed hard, remembering how he had looked at me then, like he already knew what was coming. Yeah, he knew. He warned me about all of them, but I didn't listen. I thought I could make it all work. Maybe things would get better when I came back. I shook my head, frustration flooding my chest. "But they've been doing this behind my back, all this time." Connor gave a quiet nod, his voice softer now. "You can't change the past, but you can change what happens next." I looked up at him, finally meeting his eyes. "How do we do that?" "We take this to court," he said, his words cutting through the fog in my head. "We file a claim, get those false papers overturned. We make it clear this place is yours and you're not backing down." I felt a fire starting to build inside me, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. "Yeah," I said, my voice more certain now. "Yeah, we're doing that. I'm not letting her win. Not this time." Connor smiled slightly, giving me a nod of approval. "I've got your back, Lacey, every step of the way." And for the first time in days, maybe longer, I felt like I wasn't alone in this fight. It was like something inside me snapped back into place, that feeling of fighting for what's mine, what was always mine. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about taking back my life, my story, and I wasn't about to let anyone rewrite that. I turned to face the house, feeling the weight of it all. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their permission. This was my fight, my future, and I was ready to take it back. The next morning, Connor and I spread out on the kitchen table, sorting through the paperwork like we were preparing for battle. It felt like a mission, cold, methodical. The printer hummed in the background as we printed out copies of the deed, my service records, the transfer documents Trina had forged, anything we could use to prove the truth. Every time I clicked the scanner, I felt a little more in control. Every notarized page was another step closer to claiming what was mine. Connor was moving fast, focused, checking off boxes on a list. I knew he'd been here before. This wasn't his first time taking on a fight, but it felt like it was mine. Like I was finally standing up for something bigger than just myself. He handed me another document. Sign here. This one's for the affidavit. I nodded, taking the pen and scrawling my name without hesitation. I'd never felt more certain of anything in my life. But then, just as I was about to grab another stack of papers, the door creaked open behind us. I didn't even need to turn to know who it was. Eileen. She stepped into the room, her expression half curious, half distant. What's all this? Her voice was as flat as I remembered, barely any emotion in it. I didn't bother with small talk. Legal stuff, I said, keeping my tone even. Documents for the house. She looked at the piles of paper, her eyes flicking from the papers to me and then back again. She lingered, as if waiting for something. You okay? I held her gaze for a moment, but I didn't say anything. There was nothing left to say. She hadn't been okay with me in years, and I wasn't about to pretend I could fix whatever had been broken between us. Not now. I kept it short. Yeah, I'm fine. My voice was sharper than I intended, but I didn't care. She didn't need comfort from me. She needed to stay out of this. Eileen gave me a long, cold look. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and then she nodded, turning and walking out without another word. It felt like she was trying to put a period on our conversation, but I wasn't letting it end that way. As soon as she was gone, I exhaled, letting the tension in my shoulders fall away. I'm not doing this for her, I muttered under my breath, more to myself than to Connor. He glanced over at me, nodding. You're doing this for you, and for your dad. I stared at the papers in front of me, the weight of it all settling in. This wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about everything they'd tried to erase, and I wasn't going to let it happen. Just then, the doorbell rang, and I wasn't sure if I was relieved or pissed. I got up, glancing at Connor, who gave me a half smile, like he already knew. I opened the door to find Liam, a cousin I hadn't seen in years. His broad frame filled the doorway, and there was a quiet strength in his eyes. He didn't say anything at first, just looked me over, like he was making sure I wasn't a ghost or something. I heard, he said simply, about what's been going on. I let him in, and he didn't waste any time. He sat down at the table, pulling up a chair next to me, his presence solid and steady, like he wasn't going to let this fight break me. His eyes flicked over the papers, and he reached for one of the documents without asking. Trina doesn't get to just take this from you, he said, his voice low but firm. I don't know what her deal is, but this is your house, your family. I'm with you. I looked over at him, surprised by how easily he fit into this new team I was building. I hadn't expected him to show up, but now that he was here, it felt like something clicked. The house was no longer just a battlefield. It was a mission, something we were going to win together. Thanks, I said quietly, feeling a lump in my throat I hadn't expected. Liam just nodded, his hand resting on the papers in front of us. Let's get this done. As the hours passed, we worked together, moving from task to task, scanning, printing, signing. The house was full of a quiet kind of energy now, the weight of the past settling on the shoulders of those who cared enough to fight for it. And for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like I was alone in this fight. Connor had the idea to film a legal affidavit video. He set up the camera on the table, and I sat down in front of it, my hands steady as I spoke directly into the lens. I, Lacey Donovan, am the rightful owner of this property, I said, my voice clear, unwavering. I was never missing. I never abandoned this home. I have legal proof of my ownership, and I will not be erased. It wasn't a speech. It was a promise. To myself, to my father, to the house that was still mine. When the video was finished, I looked around the table, at Connor, Liam, the papers we'd just finalized. This was just the beginning. The memorial was exactly what I expected, a show. The kind of gathering where everyone pretends to care about a person they barely knew, then quickly moves on to the next social obligation. The room was packed, family members and old friends filling every corner, some murmuring about my father, some whispering about me, like I wasn't even supposed to be there. I could feel the weight of their judgment like a thick coat wrapped around my shoulders. Trina stood at the front of the room, a smile glued to her face, her hands clasped in front of her like she was about to deliver a sermon. She started talking about my dad, some half remembered stories, some sentimental nonsense that didn't match up with who he really was. But the crowd was eating it up. She had that charisma, the way she could twist words to make herself look like the grieving daughter, the one who'd been there all along, taking care of everything. I stayed in the back, my hand still shaking slightly as I gripped the envelope with the legal documents. Then came the moment. And now, as we honor my father's legacy, Trina said, her voice ringing out clear across the room, I'm pleased to announce that, as his daughter, I've inherited his house, the home we all grew up in, and the home I'll be caring for in his memory. A murmur rippled through the guests. I could hear some of them clapping, nodding in approval, like they hadn't seen this coming a mile away. The smell of expensive cologne and flowers in the room made me want to choke. That was it, my breaking point. I didn't care who was watching or who I pissed off. Trina had crossed the line, and this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about everything they tried to erase, my father's memory, my life, and my place in all of it. I moved before I could stop myself, stepping out from the back of the room, my voice slicing through Trina's little performance. That's a lie, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Heads turned. The murmurs faded. Trina's smile faltered, her eyes flashing with surprise and irritation as she spun around to face me. I'm sorry, she asked, her voice too sweet, too fake. I didn't hesitate. I walked straight to the front, pulling the envelope out of my bag, and with a quick flick, tore it open. This house is mine, I said, the words coming out hard and clear. Not hers, not anyone else's. It's mine. I slammed the deed onto the podium where Trina had just been standing, the paper snapping like a whip as it landed. I didn't wait for anyone to say anything. I took the next step. This is the legal proof. My father's will, the deeds, everything you've been trying to steal. I still own this property. I'm the one who was supposed to inherit it, not her. I gestured toward Trina, who stood there like a deer caught in headlights. The room went silent. No one knew what to say at first. Then slowly, people started to murmur, exchanging looks, glancing from Trina to me, back to Trina. Trina's face twisted, her mask slipping just enough to show the anger simmering underneath. This isn't the time, Lacey, she hissed, her voice a sharp whisper only for me. You're embarrassing yourself. You're embarrassing Dad's memory. I didn't back down. Number you are, I said, calm, deliberate. You're the one who's been lying. You thought I wouldn't come back. You thought you could take everything. Well, guess what? I'm here, and this house is still mine. At that moment, Connor stepped forward from the back of the room, his presence cutting through the tension like a knife. His voice was steady, authoritative. I can confirm everything she just said, he said, holding up a stack of notarized documents. I've seen the paperwork. It's all legal. Lacey Donovan is the rightful owner of this house. Trina's eyes went wide, and I could see the panic start to creep in. Her smile was gone now, replaced by something far more dangerous. You're just going to let her do this? She snapped at the crowd, trying to regain control. She's lying. I've been the one here, taking care of everything. I'm the one who deserves this house. But the damage was done. The crowd had already seen the truth. Connor's words rang in the air, and for the first time, the support shifted. No one was looking at her the way they had before. No one was buying the act anymore. Trina tried to recover, stepping closer to me, her voice low but full of venom. You won this round, Lacey, she muttered, her words barely audible. But don't think this is over. I'll make you regret this. I met her gaze without flinching. Bring it, I said, my voice even, my hands steady. I'm not going anywhere. The silence in the room felt suffocating, but it didn't matter anymore. This wasn't just about a house. This was about something far bigger. And then I turned to face my mother. Eileen was sitting at the back, her face pale, her eyes wide with a mix of disbelief and something else I couldn't place. She didn't speak. She didn't try to defend me. She just sat there, frozen, caught between her own silence and the truth that had finally spilled out. I didn't need her to speak. The truth had been said, and I was no longer waiting for her approval. The moment was mine now, and I was done letting them write my story for me. The cemetery was quiet, the kind of quiet that settles deep into your bones. I stood by my father's grave, feeling the weight of it all. The fight, the lies, the decades of being erased. The wind cut through the trees, cold and sharp, but I didn't feel it. I just stared down at the stone, the name etched into it. John Donovan. My dad. I took a deep breath and pulled the letter from my pocket. It felt heavy in my hands, like it carried everything I had left to say. I set it down on the grave, letting the paper flutter in the breeze for a moment before it settled. Dad, I whispered, the words soft but real. I've done what you told me. I didn't let them take it. I didn't let them take me. I paused, staring at the letters carved into the stone, the ones that would never change. Loving father, devoted husband, the things people said at funerals, the words that were supposed to be enough. But he was more than that, so much more. I touched the stone lightly, then backed away, my chest tight. It wasn't over yet, but I had honored him in my own way. I wasn't going to let anyone rewrite his story, not anymore. Just as I turned to leave, I heard footsteps behind me. I didn't need to look to know who it was. Eileen, she stood a few feet away, hesitant, her eyes flicking from the grave to me. Her face was pale, her expression unreadable. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there, like she was waiting for me to break the silence. I kept my back to her, not ready for whatever she had to say, but I didn't walk away. Not yet. I never thought you'd go this far, she said, her voice strained, like it hurt her to speak those words. I didn't respond right away. She wanted me to. She wanted me to forgive her, to make it all okay somehow, but I wasn't going to do that. Not today. Not after everything. I didn't want to, Mom, I said quietly. But you made me. You all made me. She stepped closer, the gravel crunching beneath her shoes. I'm sorry, she said, almost too quietly to hear. I should have protected you, Lacey. I should have seen it sooner. I don't know how to fix it. There it was, the apology. Soft, indirect, like she still couldn't bring herself to truly admit what had happened. I could feel her regret hanging in the air, but it didn't settle anything. Not for me. Sorry doesn't change anything, I said, my voice calm but firm. You can't go back and undo what's been done. I've had to fight for everything, for years, and you never stood up. Not once. She stayed quiet after that, her shoulders slumping, the weight of it sinking in. I didn't want you to fight, she whispered, the words breaking in her throat. I just wanted you safe. I didn't want you to turn out like this. Like what? I asked, finally turning to face her, though I still couldn't quite look her in the eyes. Like someone who doesn't let people walk all over her? Someone who stands up for herself? Is that really so bad? She flinched, but didn't answer. I let out a breath, feeling the anger and hurt in me shifting, changing into something else. Something colder, more controlled. I wasn't looking for her approval anymore. I wasn't looking for anyone's, not even hers. I'm done trying to make you see me, Mom, I said, finally meeting her eyes. I've spent my whole life trying to get your approval, and I'm not doing it anymore. Her eyes watered, but she didn't cry. I never wanted to hurt you, Lacey. I know, I said, my voice softer now. But you did, and that's something we can't change. She stayed silent after that, standing there, her gaze fixed on me. We didn't say anything more. I didn't expect her to. I turned and started walking away, the sound of my footsteps the only thing between us. My heart was still heavy, but it was different now. Lighter, in a way. I reached the car without looking back. I wasn't searching for closure, for forgiveness, or for any kind of approval. I had done what I came to do, and that was enough. I opened the door, started the engine, and drove away. No more looking back, no more waiting. The past was behind me, and I was moving forward. The legal battle wasn't over yet. I had expected it to be messy, but when Trina filed a counterclaim alleging wrongful eviction and emotional abuse, I had to suppress a laugh. Of course she would. Of course, she would try to flip the narrative, make herself the victim, make me the villain. It was exactly what I expected. Connor looked over the claim in silence, his jaw tightening as he read. It's weak, he finally said, handing me the papers. It's designed to harass, nothing more. She's just trying to drag this out, hoping you'll back down. I skimmed the document, the words like a punch to the gut. Wrongful eviction? Emotional abuse? The nerve. This wasn't about the house anymore. It was about control. It was about making me feel small. But I wasn't small anymore, not like before. Connor saw the anger in my eyes and shook his head. You could counter, Sue. We've got more than enough to bury her case. I dropped the papers onto the table, my mind racing. The thought of dragging this out in court, of wasting more time on her games, I didn't want that. I'd already fought long enough. I wasn't going to let her make this a circus. No, I said, my voice cutting through the tension. I'm not escalating this. I'm not giving her that satisfaction. Connor frowned, confused. But I stopped him with a look. We don't need to fight more. We need to end it. Connor nodded slowly, understanding what I meant. I had an idea, but it wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't about winning in court. It was about making her back off once and for all. The next day, we met with Trina's lawyer at the courthouse. Trina wasn't there, but I knew she was close by, somewhere, probably waiting for me to fold. Her lawyer, a smooth-faced guy who looked like he'd never worked a real case in his life, sat across from us, a smug little smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Lacey," he started, his tone trying to be friendly but failing. "We're here today to resolve the matter of your wrongful eviction claim." I leaned forward, cutting him off before he could go any further. "I'm not here to argue," I said, my voice steady. "I'm here to settle it." The lawyer looked surprised. He had clearly expected a fight, and I wasn't giving it to him. "Settle?" He glanced at Connor like he was waiting for him to jump in. Connor stayed silent, his eyes never leaving me. This was my move. I'd been planning it for days. "I want her to sign an affidavit," I said, my words clear and firm. "I want Trina to admit she lied about everything. The false paperwork, the misrepresentation of the property, and I want her to agree in writing that she'll stay away from me, permanently." The lawyer blinked. "You want her to sign the affidavit," I repeated, cutting him off, "or we'll go back to court, and I'll countersue for defamation. We can drag this out if you want, but you're not going to win." He looked from me to Connor, then back to me, trying to gauge whether I was bluffing. But I wasn't. He could see that. I felt Connor's gaze on me, but I didn't need him to say anything. I knew what I was doing. This wasn't about fighting. It was about reclaiming control. I wasn't going to let her keep rewriting my life, dragging me through the mud. The lawyer shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "This isn't how things work," he said, his voice lowering slightly. "You can't just demand—" "Yes, I can," I said, my voice sharp, "and I'm not backing down. I'm offering you a way out, one that saves face. You have 30 seconds to get Trina on the phone and tell her to sign it, or we're going to court and you're going to lose." He hesitated. The silence stretched, but I held his gaze. It was like he realized I wasn't just angry anymore. I was certain, and that was more dangerous than any amount of fury. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he nodded, defeated. "Fine," he muttered. "I'll get her on the phone." I didn't flinch. I didn't even smile. This wasn't a victory dance. It was just business. Moments later, the lawyer handed me the signed affidavit, and the tension in the room evaporated like a bad memory. Connor was the first to speak once everything was settled. "You did it," he said, his voice quiet but full of admiration. "You stood your ground." I nodded, glancing at the document in my hand. It wasn't about winning, not in the way people expected. It was about clarity, about making sure my name stayed intact no matter what. As I walked out of that courthouse, the sun hitting my face like a signal, I felt lighter, like the weight I'd been carrying for so long had finally been lifted. It wasn't over, but it was close, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was losing. I felt like I had finally taken control. The house felt different now. It wasn't just the paint that had been chipped away, or the dust that had settled for years, but something deeper. I was taking it back, piece by piece. The walls that had once held Trina's fingerprints, her presence, were now mine again. The old family photos that she'd replaced with yoga posters, gone. Replaced with frames of my own, ones that had collected dust in boxes until now. Liam helped me with the painting. He was here most days, working alongside me, making it feel less like a chore and more like a mission. The smell of fresh paint filled the air, mingling with the scent of wood and dust, and for the first time in forever, the house smelled like me. Connor handled the last of the legal stuff, the final signatures, the paperwork. He came over in the afternoons, pulling up the documents and making sure every detail was squared away. He'd never said much, but I could see it in the way he worked. He was quietly proud of what I was doing, of what we'd done. A few days after everything was finalized, I walked past the dining room where Trina's leftover junk still sat, the things she hadn't bothered to take when she left. A few framed pictures, some decorative trinkets. The remnants of her invasion, I grabbed a box and shoved everything inside, not sparing a second glance. There was no room for her in this house anymore. That's when I saw the letter. It was on the kitchen counter, slipped under the mail. I didn't have to look at the return address to know who it was from. It was Eileen. I tore it open and scanned the words quickly. She apologized, sort of. She regretted how things had turned out. She was sorry for the way she treated me, but it was all buried under the weight of things I'd already heard 100 times. Guilt, excuses, and a hint of blame. Like maybe I was the one who'd pushed her away, instead of the other way around. I didn't need it. I didn't need her apology. I stopped reading after the first few sentences. My hand clenched around the letter. The paper felt thin, useless in my hands. I didn't need validation from her anymore. I had my own. I had my truth. Without a second thought, I walked outside to the fire pit, lit a match, and watched the paper curl and blacken. The flames ate through the letter like they were consuming the last remnants of her influence on me. I felt lighter as it burned, like something was finally, permanently being released. I didn't look back. Not this time. Later that week, as I was finishing the last coat of paint on the hallway trim, my phone buzzed. A voicemail. It was from a veterans group. They had heard about my story and wanted me to speak at an event. They believed my experience could inspire others, help those who had been through similar struggles. I listened to the message twice, then sat there for a moment, letting it sink in. For years, I had hidden my story. I had buried parts of myself under layers of silence and shame. But now someone wanted to hear it. I didn't hesitate. I called them back. I accepted. For the first time in a long time, I saw a new possibility for myself. Not just in the house, but in the world. My story had value beyond these walls, and I wasn't going to hide it anymore. As I sat on the front porch that evening, watching the sun sink behind the trees, I realized that everything had changed. The house wasn't just a place. It was a symbol of what I'd fought for, of who I was becoming. And for the first time, I was okay with that. The veterans event was held in a large hall, the walls lined with flags and photos of those who had served. The air was thick with the scent of coffee and the quiet murmur of people reconnecting, sharing stories of their pasts. I stood backstage, waiting for my turn. My heart was pounding, but it wasn't fear this time. It was something different, a strange mix of purpose and clarity. When they called my name, I stepped out to the microphone. The crowd fell silent, the room suddenly feeling smaller, more intimate. I looked out at the faces in the crowd, all of them carrying their own scars, their own stories. They weren't looking at me with pity. They were looking at me with respect. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I'm here because I know what it feels like to be forgotten, I started, my voice steady. I spent years believing my story didn't matter, that the things I went through didn't count because I wasn't the person people expected me to be. But you know what? That's a lie. I paused, letting the words sink in. I could feel the weight of it. My truth, out in the open for the first time. I fought for a home, for my place in this world. And I fought for it not because I had to, but because I realized I deserved it. We all do. No matter where we've been, no matter what we've been through. The room was quiet for a moment, then a ripple of applause spread through the crowd. It wasn't loud, but it was enough. It was all I needed to know they understood. I went on, sharing how I'd fought to reclaim my space, how my father's warning had guided me, and how, in the end, I found strength in standing up for myself. When I finished, the applause was warmer, more genuine. It felt like something was shifting inside me, something I'd been holding on to for so long. I wasn't just telling my story anymore, I was owning it. Liam was in the crowd, standing off to the side, his arms crossed. He didn't say anything, but I could feel his support in the way he stood there, his presence solid and quiet. After the event, as I made my way home, I passed by the house, the one I'd fought for, the one that was mine again. I glanced at it, but there was no need to stop. I didn't need to go inside. I had already reclaimed it. I'd done what I set out to do. My phone buzzed just then, a message from Connor. I've got an offer for you to lead a nonprofit board. It's yours if you want it. You've earned it. I stared at the message for a moment, the weight of it sinking in. I hadn't expected this, not at all. But there it was, an opportunity I hadn't even known I wanted. I didn't hesitate. I replied, yes. As I drove past the house again, I realized something. Justice wasn't loud. It wasn't some grand, dramatic thing. It didn't need to be. Sometimes it just walked beside you, quiet and steady, until it was done. And when it was, you didn't need anyone's approval to know you were right. You just kept moving forward.